So a very warm welcome to the next in our series of video interviews with technology chief executives. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Igor Leprince, who's the Group CEO of BAI Communications. Igor, good morning. Great to see you.
Morning, pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Perhaps to kick off, could you provide a short introduction to yourself and BAI Communications?
Sure, Mike. Well, you said it all already. So my name is Igor Leprince. Been the 25 years now, almost well, actually a bit more than 25 years in the telecom. And as you said, Group CEO of BAI Communications. I've had this position now for almost 2.5 years. And just in one sentence, BAI is a neutral host, and we basically design, we build, we operate, and we actually finance and fund connectivity, or let's call it wireless and fiber networks for customers around the world.
Great stuff. I mean, connectivity is an essential enabler for widespread digital adoption, and BAI is clearly a key player in this space. What's your sort of near and long-term vision for the company, and what exciting trends are you seeing in the industry presently, and perhaps over the next 12 to 24 months?
Sure. So let's start with the vision. I think vision is relatively simple. It's at high level, is our business is really to build next generation of network that, connect where people work, where people live, where people spend their free time, and I guess the way they travel in between, which is very relevant to our business. And we're doing this for our customer, which are first and foremost the mobile network operators, or for that matter, the broadcaster in Australia, but also cities, transport agencies, venues of all type, enterprises, communities, and very often we like to think that we are actually the glue between these different parties and different customers. So that's for that part of your question. In terms of trend, well, without stating some of the obvious, but obviously the huge need for connectivities, and that's fast and reliable connectivity that drives really the need for coverage, for capacity, for technology like 5G that everyone talks about, obviously. So that's one. Then you've got the potential that 5G combined with other technology like AI, analytics, IoT, to really be a great enabler for, let's call it public and private enterprises, to drive efficiency, drive experience, drive also safety. I'm sure we'll come back to that. So these are the macro trend. And then for that, you need a lot of investment. And if you combine that with other trends like the push for net zero, the fact that a lot of commoditized solutions like Open RAN are becoming available, well, you think about neutral hosts and share infrastructure. It's really a critical way to solve, I guess, the problem between the need for investment, but do it at an affordable cost, doing it with the constraints of, space in cities or in transport network, and the constraints of environment. So that's, every day what, this is more and more critical. And, the good thing is this is exactly what we do, right? So.
Yeah. And BAI is a growing business in itself. I was curious to know how you ensure a scaling organization stays aligned with your long-term vision, because that's a tricky balance to find.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's critical. I mean, if you think about my, I guess, top 10 priorities, or I think when I wake up in the morning on the way I put my agenda or spend my time, this is absolutely key. And you said we're growing, and I'll give you a practical example of what it means and how relevant your question is. Between the acquisition we've made in the last 12 months, I don't know when you're going to air that, but by the time you air that, we'd have closed the fourth acquisition we've done probably in the last 12 months. And the people we recruited to deliver some of the big projects that we won. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about TfL. We actually more than doubled the size of the company in the last 2 years. We had almost 400 people joining us in the last year. Actually, I was laughing the other day. I stood in front of a group of top 80 leader in London, and the other day, and 2/3 of them had joined the company in the last 2 years. I was actually one of the oldest person in the room, and I've done it only for 2.5 years, as we discussed. So, basically, to answer your question, to do that, that's a lot of time and investment on leadership and engagement, on putting priority on topics that people are passionate about, that are also driving them together, like diversity, inclusion, the difference we make through our work. Hopefully we can talk about that, climate change. And it's also preserving some of the excellent cultural strengths and vision that we had coming from our long history in Australia. We are known as a company, hopefully, that has a lot of trust, openness, very non-hierarchical, no politics. And when you acquire and you grow, you want to keep that. And that's absolutely key. I'm absolutely a firm believer that people want, obviously, challenge, success, achievement, development, and with all the growth that you talk about, we bring plenty of that to our people. But they also want to enjoy the journey and the environment they work. So that's clearly one of the key focus, to make sure that everyone is aligned to this long-term vision.
And just as an aside, I mean, it got me thinking about purpose and how important purpose is for organizations and for employees that work for organizations. I mean, BAI has a great purpose of providing connectivity. How sort of ingrained is that across the organization?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's extremely important. Of course, some of our solutions that we're talking are exactly that, right? And it make people actually very happy and proud to do that. I mean, things that come to mind in what we do is think about what we do in the Sunderland Smart City, for example. We have use cases in social care where you're putting IoT sensor indoors, so to help people to enhance their quality of life, so they can live independently or stay at home as long as they can. If you think about the emergency network in the tube, for example, it's people feeling safer that they know they have connectivity when they travel on that. Recently, we finished a project for a wind farm, for example, and it's allowing people to stay connected to their family, which was not the case. Well, one last one. I mean, in New York, for example, especially during COVID, the free Wi-Fi network we have around the city, for example, it's the only access to the internet for a lot of people, and they would not have that otherwise if we didn't have that. So these are the sort of example where we make a real difference, and that the work we do has a real purpose beyond just building network and connectivity for no other reason, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect it's very transformative what you're providing. It's changing the way people live and work ultimately. I can see that as being a huge customer benefit. If you don't mind, let's focus on the UK for a moment.
Sure.
Fiber to the premise and connectivity are both critical to the UK standing as a global digital leader. I've seen, as you have, increased investment, especially from private equity. But I'm curious to get your view on where does the UK stand on the journey to connectivity everywhere? What are we doing right, and what could we do a lot better?
Yes, good question. And I think the short answer is I think the UK government has made quite a lot of great progress in delivering this, what you said, this improved digital infrastructure, this super fast broadband coverage. I mean, it was around 50%, a bit more than 50% in 10 years ago, and now we're more than 97%, 98%. So it's a huge improvement, and I think the government understand and are enabling better, access to the benefit of digital technology. They have funded a lot of adoption of cutting edge technology. Before BAI, I was part of this West Midlands 5G that was funded by DCMS. So I think there has been an understanding of that. And by the way, many governments and many countries around Europe were not doing that at all, right? So I think that's been good. If you think about the enabling of smart city and connected communities, I spoke briefly about Sunderland. I think that's been also a major focus for local government. So I think there's been a lot of good things done. No doubt we can and we'll have to do more. I think the part that maybe we should continue to look at is, and obviously I'm biased on that, but it's a realization that a neutral host provider like us can be a great partner in this endeavor, and to do that, right? And actually, we would love to be this UK-based neutral host champion because, as I said at the beginning, it costs a lot of money to do that. So really, to help our operators, to help the city, to help the vertical, the benefit of the neutral host to make this, to have access to this shared infrastructure, make the investment, the OPEX, the dealing with this environment easier. I think is also a great way beyond what the government has already done in pushing this agenda.
Do you think that the concept of leveling up across the UK, connectivity is actually quite an important element to that? Could you just talk briefly about how connectivity will help that leveling up agenda?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a critical part of that, and without connectivity, and again, very often we reduce ourselves to urban and rural area. I think it's a lot more complex than that. There are also many urban environment in some part of the country that don't have the connectivity that they need and deserve. So absolutely, and again, I don't want to make maybe too many a reference to that, but before BI, we looked at in West Midland 5G how 5G could make a difference in many different vertical, healthcare, manufacturing, bring productivities to that. But the basic on that, and again, that's what we do in Sunderland with all the different use cases, is you need to have the right connectivity, which, by the way, doesn't equal necessarily 5G, in order to do that, and to make sure that you have the right investment also into the different areas. So it's absolutely critical.
Yeah, using a football analogy for a moment, if you think about the UK sitting in, say, the Premier League, and which countries are right at the top and which ones are in the Champions League places, is the UK, the US the most advanced, or are there other countries that are really pushing ahead from a connectivity perspective?
Yeah, so that depends if you talk Champions League, which you reduce to the European territory, or if you talk World Cup, which we're going to get to in a few weeks. I think in terms of Champions League, in terms of European, I think the UK has done very well on 5G. And when you look at whether it's launch of 5G, whether it's 5G coverage, whether it's broadband, there's been a lot of progress on that. So I would say clearly in the semi-final and final of the Champions League. But let's face it, if you look around the world, the US has been advancing a lot faster than the UK in many of these areas. There are obviously countries around Asia in particular that's put a lot more focus and developed a lot more. And I'm not, without going all the way to China, which has developed 5G network in the millions of base stations far ahead of Europe. So I would say UK and Europe is behind some other place in the world, and I think that should be the target for the country, as opposed to maybe stay in the top of the league in the European context only. So
yeah, so in the World Cup final of connectivity, Igor, is it the USA versus who's the other?
I think it's the USA. This is Japan. This is Korea. This is China right now. If you limit that to sizable countries, I would say.
Yeah. You mentioned Transport for London earlier, and BAI Communications has been awarded a 20-year concession for TfL to deliver high-speed mobile connectivity across London. I think it's the most advanced infrastructure project of its type in the world. Could you provide some context on that project and what it will take to deliver it?
Sure. So you might have to stop me here because I can talk about that for hours, and for the obvious reason that we're obviously very, very proud of this project. I mean, it's a huge project, and it's right in the core of, I guess, the vision and what we do as a company that I talked about at the start. And obviously, despite my French accent, I've been calling the UK and London my home for 20 years. So it's also make it more special to think that we can make with this project London, faster, safer, smarter. But let me try and give you some maybe data and answering specifically your question. I mean, it's a huge project. It's I think we calculated it's more than 5 million hours of work every day. Actually, it's not every day. It's every night, to be precise. So it's almost 400 people. Think about it, every night I'd go down in the tube when the tube station are getting close. So think about midnight, 12:30 until about 4 or 5 a.m. And it's basically pulling and installing thousands of equipment, thousands of miles of cable through. It's about 130 stations, about platform. Think about a station and the number of things that are happening in the station. It's about 400 kilometers of tunnels, and you have to do that with obviously in a short time frame. It's the project is about 2-3 years, and no disruption to services, of course, right?
Yeah.
There's no way you can stop the service. So that's really the context. And what it will do is it bring the mobile coverage and capacity we don't have right now in all the station and tunnels. And if you're a user of the tube, you already have some station on the Jubilee line and the Wi-Fi network that we're upgrading. So that's obviously would be everywhere. It's also the emergency safety network for the country in the tube. So also keeping people safe on that.
Yeah.
And what people know maybe a little bit less is also building a dark fiber network along the red routes of London. And that's what it brings, actually, back to your previous question. It brings a very complementary and highly valuable set of connectivity for the mobile operator, for the fixed operators, and ultimately the enterprises through them. That doesn't necessarily exist in these areas. And then finally, with the 100,000 streetscape asset that TfL has, so that's the poles, the station entrances, the traffic light, the bus stop, that basically bring with the fiber and this asset a set of streetscape to build small cells, which we need for 5G. So back to your initial question about the connectivity you need. So, it's a very exciting project. I think we mentioned that it's about $1 billion investment in London and huge impact on people's life experience, whether it's an experience from as a person traveling to London or tourist, safety, and I want to believe for the competitiveness of London in the world. So as exciting as it gets.
Yeah, I mean, I use the tube, pretty much weekly. I wouldn't say daily anymore because the pandemic stopped that. And I can see the massive business benefit that it will deliver. What's the timeline, if you can talk about that in terms of the widest rollout of the network?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be in phases. Actually, I don't know when you're going to air that, but by the time you do it, you probably have a bunch of stations live. So the end of this year, so 2022 would be where the first additional station in addition to the Jubilee line will come live, and then pretty much every quarter between now and the end of 2023, 2024, you will have more station lines, tunnels coming live, all the way to having the whole network that I described before, which is about 400 kilometers of tunnel and about 130 stations. But yeah, it'll come in phases, with a bunch of 10, 15, 20 stations almost every quarter in the next couple of years. So.
Has there been any sort of government review on the productivity that it will enable for the workers of London to be online whilst underground? Has there been any sort of forecast on that?
I think it's always a bit difficult, as you know. I mean, we're doing every year, and I don't have it in front of me, but I'm happy to provide that. But we do a survey about what people expect. So the expectation about having really connectivities everywhere is clearly there, right? And as you said, post pandemic, we absolutely need that as a way of traveling is also completely different, right? So very, very clearly the enterprise decision maker also want to believe in investing in public connectivity. So I think that's what our research shows. In terms of putting a number in terms of productivity, I'm not quite sure, but between productivity, safety, and obviously all the things that we're doing beyond just the wireless coverage in the tube, that would have a huge impact on London for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, Igor, I think we've come to the end of our time, but finally, I can't have a passionate Frenchman on the call and not ask them 1 year out from the Rugby World Cup. What's your finals predictions? I mean, it's a French home World Cup. France have got to be there, but who do you pick? Who do you pick against the finalists? Who do you think will be there?
I mean, look, I think I agree with your prediction. What is your prediction? That France would be there, right? I mean,
France will be in the final. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah. So I agree with that. And look, I would say it doesn't matter as long as we win. But the real answer, it would be fantastic to have a France against England, obviously for obvious reasons. Although it might not make me very popular, but I've been living in this country for more than 20 years, so I'm used and I can handle that. So that would be my ideal final, and needless to say, with France winning at the end, of course.
Yeah. I think I can speak for every Englishman to say that I think that that would be our hope as well, that we get to the final, not that you win it, but England France sounds pretty good to me. Igor, thank you. Great to see you as always. Greatly appreciate your time and your insight this morning, and lovely to speak to you properly.
Pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Take care.